Hey everybody, it's Sally here. Welcome back to the Connection Project. And I'm really, really super excited today to be with my guest, who I've never met, in fact, and heard him on a podcast and was so mesmerized by what he had to say and so actually intrigued. And it really touched something in me here today with Troy. And he is the owner of a co-founder of CommonSpace, which creates spaces and designs to inspire a life of creativity, curiosity, and joy. And he is also, I'm not sure if I'll have this right, that he's co-owner, co-founder of Vanderkamp, a place where I've been wanting to hold a retreat and get out there. And I haven't been able to see this beautiful, beautiful property that I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about out in Cleveland, New York. Didn't even know that this amazing property was this close to me. So I'm excited to hear about that also. And so I'm here today with Troy, and I heard him on a podcast with Alex Canavan out in Syracuse, where she's doing all this amazing work for entrepreneurs and businesses in Syracuse. And something that really touched me, Troy, was the way you talked about connection and community and wanting to create these spaces. Um, and for me, I'm seeing this all the time. I'm in the self-development space. I'm a coach, right? A nurse. I've seen all the stuff, but I think sometimes our pendulum swings way too much one way, right? So in the self-development world, it's all about like taking care of ourselves and healing ourselves. And what I've been saying in almost every episode is there is this piece of that, right? But also this piece of community. And so I think that we're lacking that today, the community piece. And so that's what really struck me with the things that you're doing um, with this community spaces, community pieces that you're doing. So that sounds like a bunch of jumbled mess, but that's honestly how I feel. And I'm super excited to have you here today with me. If you can just give our guests a little intro to who you are and what you're doing, because I'm sure you'll do a little bit better version than I did, but I'm super excited to have you here. So thank you for spending this time with me today.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for having me. I think you did a great job of summarizing the complexity of this topic. So it's something I would call it a lifelong pursuit to figure out what all those words mean you just said. So like community and connection and inspiration and yeah, I'll throw nature in there. I'm finding they're all pointing to the same place, and it didn't start there. For me, I'll give you a little bit of quick background of um, how I got to this, thought place I am today, place of thinking, I'll call it. And I kind of started in the real estate world. I call myself a real estate developer, like when I was 23. I'm 45 now. And back then it was very transactional, very capitalist approach to things. I made apartments, I built spaces, and they were really designed to make a profit. And then, along the way, it lost meaning, and I went through some cycles of, figuring out what I want to do with my life. Probably I go through that every 5 years. I tell people I want to figure out what I want to do with my life, and right now I'm in a good spot. So it'll be another 5 years before I figure it out again. But as I would go through those cycles, I would be like, well, this is good, and it's adding value because people are finding value in the things I'm doing. But like, how do I really um, find the meaning in the work? And that led me to CommonSpace, which was our first kind of endeavor into trying to create community for people. And at the time, what that meant was really just like getting a way to know your neighbors. So we've studied this a ton, and we found that basically, like you said, we've lost a sense of community in some of our neighborhoods and things like that since like the 1950s, when everybody had a front porch and they're waving to their neighbors as they walk by these like row houses. We've made back porches and isolated ourselves in the suburbs since then. And urbanization has been trying to repair some of that. And so this was, almost 15 years ago, we went down the rabbit hole of, all right, how do we create buildings that create a neighborhood in the building? So like you make it very comfortable to know your neighbors. And in the research of that, we thought this was what people wanted. And what we found was yes, that was true. And it wasn't even that hard to do. We originally set out like, let's make spaces. It's all about the space, and we're going to make it comfortable, and we're going to make like a town square approach to our villages. So we'd say like we'd have a building, every floor would have a central common area. So you'd have a circle of apartments. You'd come out of your apartment. It wouldn't be a long hallway. It'd be like a shared kitchen on one floor and a shared living room on another floor and a library on another. So like the space would enhance, the connection with your neighbors. Um, so we built buildings that did that, and it came along with this story that we told people that like, look, when you live here, before you even sign up, you're gonna know your neighbors, you're gonna meet new people, and we kept reinforcing that, and we call it brand now, that story. And after years of studying this, we figured out basically that it didn't matter what the space was like. All it mattered was that story. If we made it culturally acceptable to say hi to your neighbors, people did it. They would see someone sitting on the couch and be like, "Hey, I'm Troy, what's up?" And that was totally fine. But if you were in a normal apartment building with a hallway, it wasn't okay to do that, even though both sides wanted to do it. So that's the type of community we were developing back then. But I'll take a break, and you can throw out some questions at me before I ramble on for too many hours.
No, I actually could just listen to you ramble on. I was just talking to two friends of mine recently that are dealing with elderly, parents. And so to me, this like goes right into that, right? Because in the past, right, we lived in these communities where people, some people worked, some people didn't. There was multiple levels of generations in the community. And so for our elderly, we were able to take care of them, right, within the community. And now everybody's working and so busy, and to be able to do that. And I feel like even in these community spaces, which isn't necessarily for the elderly, but it just transcends all the levels, all the ages,
Yeah.
because we have shut ourselves off so much that it doesn't even feel safe for us to say hi to the person on the couch or in the hallway. Like there's something internal in us that's created this unsafety, right, in our body. So even though if we both people want to do it, and then for our elderly population, right, we're seeing that now, that struggle. How are we going to take care of this elderly population, because everybody's working and everybody's so busy and everybody has kind of isolated themselves for one reason or another. So I know that that's like off the beaten path of what you're talking about
Oh,
with common sense, but I think it all transcends each other, and it is such a kind of a problem. And I love the way you're doing it in the day to day with this common space and having people know it's okay to slow down and say hi to your neighbor and feel part of something. Because I think I was talking to a friend of mine, and you know her dad is feeling like so isolated, but he wants to be isolated because that's all he's used to now, and he's almost fearful, I think, of to go into that community space because we've just created such a different vibe or energy in the
yeah,
world. And
right.
so we need each other. Like
Yeah,
we're not programmed to be all lone wolves.
yeah. And you are spot on with the demographics, because it's really everyone that's craving this. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. So when we first created Common Spaces like 15 years ago, we thought, yeah, this is for like young people new to the city who are from out of town who don't know anybody. All right, that was what we went with. Turns out that was just a small demographic. But when we opened the first Common Space, we were like lucky enough to get an article in Atlantic magazine because it was pretty unique at the time. Now it's pretty more common, but out of that came this like pouring outreach from thousands and thousands. Like I have the old emails of thousands of people from all over the world who basically said, build one of those for me. And the demographics were like all over the map, like build one of these for autistic adults, build one of these for adult women who are divorced, build one of these for the elderly, build one of these for, people with brown eyes. It was like ridiculous. Like basically any demographic, or build one in Toledo, build one like in every location. So what it told us was everybody is craving this sense of community, and whatever that means to them. It's not a demographic. So now when we think about what we're building, we're trying to make it just more diverse, because what I grew up in a small town in the Catskills, and when I studied that place, it had a lot of benefits. There were some negatives, but the benefits were around the diversity, like income diversity, personality diversities, like age, like you took care of the elderly. Like my mom used to bring soup to the, people in the trailer park next door, like that were elderly. Like there's just this taking care of each other that was in that small town, that I think we would like to figure out how to like bring more of that into like our spaces. So that means creating like a certain percentage that are elderly, a certain percentage that maybe have adult disabilities, and then a certain percentage that are young, a certain percentage that are, young professionals. So like trying to make this, and then race diversity and sex diversity, but basically like a normal world that we're not like, putting people in silos and say, all right, two
Right.
people here, yeah, which is
Right,
what happened.
because there's so much to learn from each other, right? We're so siloed.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think I could talk
it's
about this all day. We're so siloed. And then I even know like in a hospital setting, I was in the hospital for 27 years and until I kind of branched out and doing my own thing now, but being a nurse in the hospital, right? Like people are craving connection and
yeah,
community. And that's why I started this podcast because technology is great. Like I'm able to speak to you today over Zoom and we don't have to be right next to each other. And we can still have an amazing connection because I'm so interested in what you have to say and what you're doing. Um, and we can be not connected to someone sitting next to us. And how do we get people to really, because they are craving it, but I do think there's a fear factor. There's a fear about
yeah,
race and disabilities, people with disabilities. If you didn't grow up with people with disabilities, I had a sister that was, like, almost, like, scared of people with disabilities. She's
mm,
passed now, but she was, like, scared almost because it wasn't something in her world, and so it is so important for us to be able to understand each other on that human level because we're all living this human experience, right? We're in these human bodies right now living this human experience, but we all have this thing and this gift and this medicine, whatever it is, to share, even when we don't even know we have it. And I think there's so much to be learned from that diversity in a community space where the new couple or the young single woman is learning from the older gentleman who's kind of miserable because he's been in his own doing his own thing for so long and they learn so much from each other.
yeah,
Yeah, I just find that to be really, really what we need in this world, um, to
yeah,
create a more loving, accepting world, because people
yeah.
have a lot of fear.
Yeah,
So then
fear,
they put up that wall and they don't want that person on their block or whatever the case may be.
right.
Um, because they
Yeah,
don't know them as a human. They don't know them as like, as what
right.
their real essence.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We made up a story about the others, whoever they are, and then you perpetuate that story by like living in isolation around it. So like, yeah, that's a great point. Like there's what we want to highlight is what we want to show as best we can is that there is no differences, right? It's all one. We're all so similar. But what, where it starts is that learning like you talked about. So like we just had like an 80-year-old gentleman that lived here. He left now, but it was so cool. We would go to like a happy hour and there'd be like 20 somethings, and then this guy in the corner hanging out, like just like sparking wisdom for people, but like the similarities I always thought were more interesting. Like they're just the same. They're just like they're both like looking for that connection. They're both like trying to learn, try to educate themselves, and like and they can both learn from each other. Like that elderly gentleman learned just as much from the younger folks as they learned from him. So that finding that commonality first in our humanness, and then like, oh, all right, now that that's established, we can be open-minded, and we can listen and we can ask questions, and we don't have to agree on everything, but we can create that like that synergy, which is, yeah, definitely isn't, it's not something new. This is old, right? This is ancient, and we're just like bringing it back to life now. And like the same with what you're doing, it sounds right up our alley of like talking about these things and like trying to establish it to be the normal social culture because, and then, this is a very American thing too, that we're dealing with in other cultures. They have, different challenges around community, but they're not the same because basically we made it up. We made up this culture, which is just all of us agreeing that this is the way it is, and that's how we do things around here. We don't, make eye contact with people on the street because that's rude or whatever it is. And it doesn't make it right. It just makes it the way it is. And if we want to change it, you got to be that change like you're doing, like just, and I would say what we're trying to do is like be that change and just do it differently and like explain the normalness of it.
Yeah, it's so true. When I started the podcast, I wasn't even really sure. My husband actually said to me, like, like, aren't you going to run out of things to talk about connection? I'm like, I don't think so because it really covers so many facets. And each time I find a new person that I want to talk to, it's like I probably when I was starting, I wasn't thinking I was going to be talking to Troy Evans today about his design of CommonSpace and how people are living together. That didn't even cross my mind, except what did cross my mind is how we are not living in community anymore. So like this totally makes sense. And this is old, as you said, right? Like we used to live in tribes and communities, and people took care of each other. And there were the people that made the money or brought home the goods or whatever it was back in the day. And there
Yeah.
were the people that were home taking care of each other. And that's where I think we've gotten lost. And so I just think this is so amazing because I do think there's so much to learn from each other that we couldn't even put a price tag on.
Yeah.
Because we've lost, I feel like in general, we've kind of lost, and not to be in a negative headspace, but we've kind of lost the humanness, like, right? Like just you said, and I experienced this in the hospital. Um, I, not from everybody, but I don't know how many consultants we had paid when I was there to come in and increase our Press Ganey and like how are we going to get patient satisfaction up? And I used to say, well, I can tell you, people need to put their head up, say hello, ask someone if they're lost. Like it's not rocket science. And and I'm not saying I know it all, but it's just common sense, right? Like people want to feel a certain way. It isn't
Mhm.
necessarily what you say or how intelligent you are. People want to feel a certain way when you're talking to them or saying hello to them. And so we have been programmed, I kind of feel like put your head down, don't make eye contact like you said in the street, don't engage.
Yeah.
And we really need to like engage in each other. Like we need to learn about each other. Everybody has so much to offer, whether they're 80 or whether they're 8, right? They have something that they bring to the table, and allowing that magic to be seen again and creating these spaces like you're doing, I just think is because I wasn't really familiar with these spaces until I heard you on the podcast. And then I was like, wow, like how do I not know about that?
Mhm.
And wow, how amazing that is. Just because how I feel really in my heart about how we should be stepping up to make change in the world, because we are very have isolated ourselves, and we're very much, I think, a world of like it's black or white, right or wrong. And we
Mhm.
can live in the duality of like, can't we both be right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I am optimistic about the whole trajectory. I do
Mm.
see, like, we live in this world and we're thinking about it a lot, but I am so optimistic about like younger folks today and like they definitely are way more involved than I was at a younger age and thinking about other people and even these challenges of right and wrong and black and white and everything's gray, which is I'm super optimistic about. And I think it's it's not an easy I don't know, answer, I don't want to call it, but it's not an easy thing to tackle, and it's still something that I personally am trying to figure out. This will be my life pursuit. Is like, what is this thing I'm chasing, right? Like, and I think I am coming to the conclusion that we're all seeking this same thing. Some admit to it, some don't, some, it's stronger in some than others, but for me, the Vanderkamp we can touch on has tied it together and highlighted some things for me when um, we purchased that place. It's an 850-acre resort, forest resort, we call it, in Oswego County, that was kind of a passion project for me to kind of get back in touch with nature where I grew up. And it is really delivered on the same, for me, the same feeling that we were trying to create in CommonSpace. So we were trying to make connections with human to human, this if you think about the feeling when you really connect with somebody, like you're making eye contact and they're really listening to you and you're really hearing them. And it's like this really, it's a feeling in your gut, you can feel that, or maybe it shows up differently for everyone in their body, but I felt that same thing in the woods, in this place. And the same thing, like connecting with, like learning about, like, again, learning about like how trees communicate to each other, and like diving into the world of, how fascinating, nature can be, and how it heals itself and creates itself. And it just highlighted this same feeling for me. Um, and then on the third element of that feeling, like connecting to yourself, um, in like a spiritual way or a self-reflection way. If you've ever been to like a retreat, an offsite retreat, you get the same feeling. It's like I'm connecting with myself, I'm figuring myself out. So for me, it's highlighted like, I don't know if I think all of those are the same. Like we're all seeking this connected experience. It's whether, it can be connected to what. I'm a believer that they're all the same thing now, or you call it like nature, or call it God, you can call it yourself, or whatever, spirituality. Like that feeling is really fun to think about how to create for free people. So like we've expanded our definition of community. We kind of don't use that word anymore. We use the word inspiration. Like we inspire people to connect with nature. We inspire people to do their best work. We inspire people to live a connected life, because the word inspire means to breathe life into, or to connect with a higher source. So like that's what I feel like we're doing. We're trying to create that inspiration in the what can be, yeah, the people or the nature or yourself, but it's that connected experience that we're trying to create. So it's I started that with saying that's what we're trying to figure out. We have no answers, only questions, and we're like toying with things to see how they work, basically.
I love it. So what Troy's talking about is he has this like, yeah, it's like what, 850 acres?
Yeah.
I
It's
think
a,
I
it's,
had seen some like periphery stuff about it, and I was like, what is this place? And then I put it all together when I heard you on the podcast. And I just literally just got back last week from a retreat I held in Sedona, my first real like retreat that I held, co-hosted with somebody, co-facilitated with someone. And yeah, inspiring is the word, right? Because I think these 12 women came together. We called them in because I'm a pretty spiritually really looking for what's I'm searching also for my life in this last or second part of my life, whatever I want to call it, um, for how I can make a difference differently than I was. And so we basically called these women in. I felt like we called them in, and it was so interesting when the women that signed up from all over, and when we got them together in the room, the similarities and the differences and the age differences, and though the inspiration that happened, we created the place for them to come and the things that we did, but they really brought the medicine, right?
yeah,
And it was so inspirational, I think, for them and for me as the facilitator hosting my first retreat. Like there is so much magic that happens when you create that space for people to come together. Um, and you never know who the people are, right? Like we knew some of them, not all of them. And yeah, it's hard to even like process like what happened after I came home because it really is very magical. And so your property, obviously, I've been trying to get out there to see it, to see about holding something out there because it really does look magical. And the nature part, and like in Sedona, right? It's not here, but it was in Sedona, and the energy in Sedona has its own specific energy. And the Catskills have their own specific energy, and Vanderkamp is going to have its own specific energy. And so there is no right or wrong place. It's just what you bring together and provide for the people that are going to come together, and feel into that, and give them space to do that. So I love that. And the fact that you have 850 acres out there is amazing. It really just looks so beautiful. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I don't
it's
know what I'm gonna do out there. I just know I'm gonna do something.
yeah, and that's what we've learned. It doesn't matter. Like the space is, it just gives you the seclusion and exclusiveness of like having that time to like reflect, connect, whatever. But like, it's really, like you said, it's about setting that stage, right? So you set the stage in Sedona. You said, like, you guys are going to come here, you're going to relax, you're going to connect, you're going to be vulnerable. And that is kind of it. Like, because everyone is seeking this thing, if you just make it socially acceptable like you did, and what we're trying to do with Vanderkamp is like, you're going to come here and it's going to be a really connected, unique energy, kind of place. Like, that stage is set, and then people come there and they have their experience, and it has so far been that easy. It's like we don't have to do too much. It's just setting it. It's going to be okay for you to be vulnerable here. It's going to be okay for you to like get into the woods and just smell, breathe, and like pay attention, look at the birds, and that's how you create reality, I think, is taking down the things that are in the way. It's not adding things, it's taking away.
Right.
And I think that's what Vanderkamp's trying to do, is just take away a few of the things that are in our way today. So that's cool. It sounds like we're doing very similar things. Love it.
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting every time as I'm on my own journey, that I meet people that are doing, because people really are. And that is another reason I think I created the podcast. I wasn't really sure, like, what is the podcast going to do for me? Like, what is the end game for that? There was really no end game. It was really about me being able to, I think, speak freely about what I feel, and
Yeah,
then connect with people, that I come across that, have these amazing things to share. And enlighten myself, and then enlighten whatever listeners I have at that moment. But it is because people are doing, and I agree with you, people are doing so much good work in the world, and we just have to keep, kind of trudging along and bringing these beautiful new perspectives. And they're some of them, they're not really new. Like, these are some old things we're almost like resurrecting, like you're saying about CommonSpace or Vanderkamp, getting back to nature, um slowing down. Like, yeah, we all need to like live, and things are expensive, but sometimes we're spinning our tails, or right, we're spinning and we're not taking that time. And that's something I have learned, and I learned the hard way working, the 60, 70-hour weeks, in healthcare. And
yeah,
not taking care of myself, not being in connection with my own body, not even knowing what that even meant. And now, as a coach and a breathwork facilitator and a somatic practitioner and all the things, I realize how important it is to connect to how we feel. You touched on this a little bit with your intuition and your gut, and what feels good for you when you're moving along in your practices and your business, creating these spaces, like what feels good. Um,
yeah. Yeah, that's something I definitely wasn't always good at, and I wish someone would have taught me how to do when I was younger. But intuition, I probably ignored it most of the time when I was younger. If it felt bad, I ignored it. And now I'm the opposite. If somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, you want to grab coffee?" And like, I usually say yes to all of that, or yes to most directions that I can handle, because as soon as you say no, there's no opportunity, right? It's shut down. Like, who knows that, but when I say yes to things, they lead to some really amazing places and amazing connections and projects and relationships that I wouldn't have got to if I didn't say yes to that thing 10 people ago. Like 10 sequences ago led me to this, to this, to this, and I said yes to this, and now it's like, oh wow, this is amazing. But if I didn't say yes a long time ago, it wouldn't have led to that. So now everything, not everything, a lot of things are led by intuition. So, something will come up, yes, no, yeah, that feels good. I'm gonna go with it. And that's kind of,
Yeah.
like this
I heard
podcast
you
is an example, like,
I
yeah,
heard you talk about that your connections with the coffee, like doing so many connections when you were talking to Alex on the podcast and that really resonated with me because I'm maybe not doing that, but there is so many things, right? Not over put making your calendar like what you can't handle, but there
yeah,
are so many things out there and there are so many of us that are really trying to make change. And if we don't connect, then there are a lot of missed opportunities. And I don't just mean in money, right? It's missed opportunities just in life, in meeting someone that really has the same thought process as you, that you can maybe really collab with or just meet with and be able to speak your language as you're trying to share it with the world on how people feel about things, and then being open to what they have to hear. Is it a different perspective? um and yeah, I didn't listen to my body either. Kidding me? I mean, I used to just push through that, all that pain that happened at the 12th hour, and then I would go to then it would become numb, so it would be the 13th hour, and I thought I was like that was my superpower at work, but realized
right,
very quickly when I started to have anxiety and panic attacks that that's not what that was. And so yeah, it's interesting how we're so disconnected from our own body and what it's telling us, because it has a lot of knowledge and wisdom. I believe way more than our brain, actually, our ego.
yeah, yeah,
And so
exactly,
just going with what feels good. And so that's obviously seems to be working for you now. You have a successful business and you're providing so much benefit to the community in Syracuse. I know you kind of have a time limit today. So is there anything that you want to tell or share with our listeners today about what you're doing out in Syracuse, or any nuggets that you want to share?
yeah, no, I think I love to just keep this conversation going, and hopefully everyone could keep doing that. I'm always a little disappointed in the male population, because like I feel like there's so many like women's groups doing like amazing things, and they get together, and a lot happen at Vanderkamp, and it's like they're so beneficial. And you know, for some reason the male population hasn't caught up to that. So I think I'll put that shout out there. We need to step it up on our front to be more open, and to tap into that thing that we've talked about for the past half hour, or be a little more open to tapping into it.
Yeah, I've had that same thought with my I became a breathwork facilitator, a somatic breathwork facilitator last year, and that's really like a passion of mine. Like breathwork is so transformational and really tapping into your body. And most of my clients or most of my groups have been women.
Yeah,
But I've been recently having more couples,
yeah,
and but I'm trying to figure out how to tap into the male population because they are really so underserved, because they're just not wanting, just not ready, just a little bit nervous. I don't know. Don't, we have so much, there's so much around that. That could be a whole nother podcast. But yeah, tapping in, because the beauty of breath work is they don't really even have to talk. They just have to lay there and breathe. And so much starts to get released and come up. And then you feel so much more space to like really live your true authentic self. So I agree with you 100%. I would love to see um, more of this work being cultivated in the male population, because it is so needed, and it's happening in certain places. I see it.
yeah.
Um, I just haven't really seen it here yet, or
Yeah,
in
well, there's definitely so many people that I know, the males that are way into this and way deeper than I am. And it's so they're there. I think the numbers are just different. And I think what at Vanderkamp, one thing we want to do is I think a lot of it's in branding, and like the way we talk about like even breath work may sound different, or not welcoming to a male, right? So like how can we rebrand that, call it something different, right? Like it's in like a
Really, I
solo.
know
Yeah,
you're right, and it's interesting because I've been going to a new place, and I just happened to run into a woman, a connection, and didn't know her, but felt like an affinity to sit next to her at a like a day retreat. And then She ended up inviting me up to do breath work for her, just for really her community, people she knew. And there's been a lot of like partners coming. And so it is so interesting because um the men are kind of loving it, but I'm not sure that these men would have come like on their own. I don't think they're really quite right in the self-development world or whatever. But the way that they spoke after the session,
Yeah.
they clearly loved it. They just
Yeah.
weren't sure what to think about it. And I do think it is a branding thing, which is not my forte of branding
Yeah.
myself in my business, but it is about bringing these people together because there's so much that we could be doing and experience. I mean, I just think about myself and how much I've grown. I don't want to say changed, but grown into the person that I think I was meant to be. But yeah, I had fear around that and
Yeah.
fear. I still have fear around, being a new entrepreneur in business and doing the podcast and all the things, because you're just not sure how people are going to accept you or is this right? And that fear is stuck in our body, right? So it's not even logical, but yeah, I think there's so much that can be done with branding and bringing people in. And so the stuff you're doing is amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. I can't wait to connect with you. If you do come up and visit Vanderkamp, I'd love to.
Yeah, I'll check with you after, but yeah, so, thank you to Troy Evans for sharing his busy time with me today and for all of you. So if you're local, I'm gonna share all of his information on the podcast and, Vanderkamp. If you haven't checked it out, hopefully we'll be holding my a retreat there soon. You'll be hearing from me about that, but I know that there's stuff being done there. It's beautiful in upstate New York, and his CommonSpace in Syracuse. So thank you so much for sharing this time with me again. Hopefully that we'll be able to talk again soon.
Definitely. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you.